hungry for his healing touch. The disciples, it was late, and the disciples were concerned and asked Jesus to send them home so they could buy food to eat. We know that feeling of being asked to leave, right? Sent away because of whom we love, or for living in our authentic gender. But Jesus said, no, let them stay. He took the only food they had, 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, who gave them to the crowds. And all abundantly ate and were filled. This was communion for 5,000 men and countless women and children. This was communion. This was the first century Woodstock without Jimi Hendrix and Joan Baez and the other loud music. This was a Woodstock where the crowd got high, not on LSD, but Jesus's message of love and his healing touch. Let them stay. Let them stay and be in communion with one another. Or if this were 5,000 asylum seekers at the border in El Paso, Texas, and the border guards with their guns were ready to send all 5,000 home, Jesus would say, no, let them stay. We have enough. We need only to look to heaven and bless the food. And while we're at it, bless the asylum seekers too. Then bless the homes we find for them. Let them stay and be in communion with us. Or better yet, let us be in communion with them. We are all in this together. But Matthew doesn't end the story there. He tells us they gathered what was left and gather all of the broken pieces, and it filled 12 baskets. Why does Matthew throw this tidbit in? Are we to leave worship today thinking that the disciples were 12 eco-friendly neatniks? While they indeed may be neatniks, biblical scholars like Raymond Brown believe that Matthew's community back in the first days of the church would understand the broken pieces as themselves. That is, they were in need of being gathered, especially after the Romans had destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. And the clue for Matthew's community was the number 12, which was the number of tribes of Israel: Judah, Joseph, Benjamin, and so forth. And isn't it still true for us in these crazy times we live in today, when we are separated from friends and coworkers, separated from financial security, and even separated from justice? Don't we need gathering? Gathering into a new Eden where we can experience the liberating love of God? Today's tribes are different, but they still need gathering. The tribe of George Floyd, the tribe of Michael Brown, the tribe of Eric Garner, the tribe of Brianna Taylor, and the tribe of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston. We may say, let them stay, but are we as individuals, and are we as a country ready to practice the real justice, that real justice love that brings real communion? And 50 or so years ago, Troy Perry formed another tribe in his living room. And that tribe grew into MCC Los Angeles and the greater metropolitan community churches of the world. Indeed, maybe the 12 tribes of the original first 12 MCC churches, which opened their doors and welcomed thousands of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and other queer peoples who had been sent away by, if not kicked out of their churches. And they were in need of being gathered by Jesus. And 50 or so years ago, a young male student at a very conservative evangelical seminary was preparing for ministry. And he was in desperate need of being gathered. He was in need to feel God's love emanating from the hearts of people just like him. So he had a friend drive him from their very conservative cemetery outside of Boston to the Boston Commons by the evangelical Park Street Church. This person happened to be Jay Deacon, who helped found MCC Hartford back in 1973. Sadly, Jay passed away at the end of June. But his story is revealing. So let me finish it by reading from his book, Magnificent Journey. Religion as a lock on the past or engine of evolution. But I wasn't headed for Park Street Church. I walked across Boston Common to the opposite corner to the Arlington Street Church, the historic Unitarian Universalist congregation once served by William Ellery Channing that now rented its smaller chapel to the Metropolitan Community Church. I went cautiously for the steps, scared of being recognized by some evangelical writing a paper about perversion. Instead, I was greeted by an actual gay person, then another, and sat toward the back of the crowded chapel. A second layer of transformation was happening while I shored up my new perception that I was okay. I was surrounded by others whose kindness, decency, and goodness I could not doubt. Whatever was being said back at that school about homosexuals was being said about them. It was rubbish. I went back the next week, Easter Sunday, met a man who understood my struggle. We arranged to meet again. No punitive lightning came from above to protest what we shared. I returned to school notably happy. And let me read a little bit more from his thoughts from the UU Rainbow History website. There I met the great Reverend Nancy Wilson, who would go on to be the denomination's leader. And I met founding pastor Larry Bernier, who had his eyes set on Hartford, Connecticut, where he wanted to plant a new congregation. I was weeks from graduation. Would I be interested? So MCC sent me to Hartford to found a new MCC congregation there. When we tried to find a house of worship that would rent to us, guess what? Only the Unitarian Meeting House in Hartford was up for it. Okay, so you weren't surprised. These were exhilarating days as both the city council and the state legislature battled over our rights and dignity in the early 1970s. I wish I could describe a quite colorful confrontation with the Catholic Bishop of Hartford and the pastor of St. Joseph Cathedral. But I have to tell you that in that incident, Capital Region Conference of Churches, who had admitted us as a member, and its director, Reverend George Wells, acted quite heroically. And we got lots of free press on the front page of the Hartford Current and on the local radio. and TV news. Jay went on to the Good Shepherd MCC in Chicago, and then on to the Unitarian Universalists. We often hear the question, why is church important? The answer is because we need to be here and ready to gather people like Jay Deacon who need to feel God's liberating love. But once feeling that love, we become liberated ourselves, and it's exhilarating and life-changing. But then we have a choice, as Jay's book title suggests. Do we get stuck being locked in the past by holding on to old ways and the old dogma? Or do we want to be as Jay Deacon and Troy Perry and Nancy Wilson did, and be engines of evolution? I say, let's choose to be engines of evolution, if not revolution. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Let it be so, God. Let it be so.